So I'm fired up about this video. I've been casing outdoors for more than half my life. I've learned a lot of things along the way. I'm going to share all that with you. We're going to cover the method that probably 99% of people do. I'll show you the tips and tricks to get beautiful results with that method. But then we're going to get into a method that I've been doing for the last 5 years. And if you run your hands over these miters here, it will send chills down your spine with how sweet they are. I'll show you both the methods and then you can choose for yourself. To get started with these doors, I needed to first remove the old door casings. To do that, you're going to need a utility knife. With that knife, you want to cut both sides of the caulking. Once you get that caulking cut all the way around, you're going to want to pry those boards off. If you've watched the channel at all, you will know that I cannot shut up about these handy beekeeping glazier bars. They're super slender and they are the perfect tool to slide in there and pry the old casings off. Once you get those casings off, you can also use this right here to pull out any of the nails that are left behind. Then also you could use the bar to scrape off any of the caulking that's left behind. You can use the flat part or the scrapey part. Get a feel for which one works best for you. I go back and forth depending on where I'm scraping. Once you've got that all scraped down, just take some 150 grit sandpaper and just give that a quick light sand all the way around. That'll just smooth it out and level off any of the bumps that might be left over. Then the next thing we want to do here is mark out the reveal. That is going to let us know how big we need to cut the pieces. Now I certainly prefer a 1/4 inch reveal, but the previous casings were 3/16 reveals, so I'll stick with that. You just have to be careful that you don't end up getting too tight to the hinge. When it comes to marking out the reveals, there's nothing better than making one of these little reveal blocks. You can make one of these at home on a table saw if you have one. I used some 1/2 inch material, then I just marked out 3/16 off the top edge here. And put that piece and set the blade depth to that 3/16. Then you want to set the fence and measure from the fence over to the far side of the blade 3/16 as well. Run this thing through the table saw. Now you really do need one of these little flat paddle push sticks here to make these. Otherwise it can be very dangerous. This is going to make it a lot safer. If you don't have one of these and you have a table saw, I highly recommend getting one. I'll link some of these in the description as well as the other tools. Run that through all 4 cuts. Then you're going to want to set the fence a little closer to the blade. Don't go all the way tight or you will scratch up your fence. You can see I've done that a few times on my fence. Make one more cut and then just break the pieces off. Scrape out the little flat edge with the little scraping bar, clean it out a bit, run a little 150 grit sandpaper, smooth out those edges. I just rounded over all the edges as well, just so it'll slide in and out of my pocket nicer. Then take that little block and mark out your reveals. Each of the corners there, it's a little tricky on the hinge side, but you can slip it in there up top. I also like to mark out a mid and a bottom spot. And the reason why you made it 3/16 depth is on the hinge side, when the doors open, you can just flip that around and use the edge of it to mark the 3/16. So once you've got those 3/16 marked out, it's time to measure. I'll measure out each of the sides and then I'll just write those measurements on the side drywall here. For the header piece, I'm not going to measure to the lines. I'm going to measure the inside of the frame and then I will add 3/16, 3/16, 3/8 to the measurement and then write that overall measurement up top. You can see why it is nicer as well to work with 1/4 inch because then you're adding 1/2 inch, and if you're working in millimeters, you're just laughing at us because we are mental with our imperial fractions. Once you've got everything measured up, I like to transfer all those measurements onto a little scrap piece of wood. I've made myself a little diagram. I've written the measurements out there. This way you can put this right beside your saw. You can reference it. You know which piece needs to get which angle and which measurement to cut it. It's going to save you a lot of heartache to make yourself a little map. Getting into the cutting here, clean cut your first edge here, flip your board around, and then you want to make out your mark. The mistake that a lot of folks make is making their marks on the face of the material here. What I like to do is I'll hook on that clean cut end, come along and I'll make my mark on the edge and just work your pencil and shade right into the area of your mark. Put a little X on the cut side. And then I like to just squiggle a little cut direction on the face of the material. That way you're not gonna mess it up. So get your saw set to a 45. Make sure it's at a 90 here. You can just give that a quick check. Make sure it's hitting on the bolt. There you go. And then when it comes to making the cut here and getting this perfectly on the line, this is the beauty of the DeWalt saw. You can take your thumb, pull the guard out of the way, and you can sight along the blade like a rifle from one tooth to another tooth right onto that mark. And you want to be aiming to cut the mark entirely off. You're just getting rolling and you're a little unconfident. Leave a little bit of line on, make your initial little cut, and then just micro adjust and then cut the rest of the line off. Of course, before you start the cut, just let the blade back down, the blade guard back down, and then go ahead and cut. And then when it comes to the header piece, in order to get an accurate measurement there, I'll cut the 45 on the right side. I'll slide that piece right to the edge of the saw here. Then you can hook on your tape, go ahead and make that mark where you need to cut the other miter. Put the little X, the little top mark, and cut. Let's get to the installation here. We're gonna cover the most common installation. It's probably a little bit easier than this level 12 over here. We'll get to that one. To get this done here, we're gonna need a nail gun. 18 gauge is the way to go. I'm using 2-inch nails here. You're gonna need some wood glue, and then I also like to have some little shims. If you can cut them out of MDF, that's the way I like to go. It's easier to cut them off, but any kind of material will work. Now the first step for me here is to nail on the header piece. I like to start with the header piece and then do the side pieces just because you have a little bit more flexibility that way. If you need to slightly adjust the angle, you can always cut it off the side piece and then you might have a tiny, tiny gap on the floor. So I'll start off with the header and I'm just gonna nail it in the middle so I can tweak things and adjust things. I get that centered on my reveal marks and then nail that on. The next side here that I'm going to work on is the left side. And now if you go around your house currently right now, you'll probably notice that a lot of your miters are not meeting up on the bottom part here. What happens there is the door frame, sometimes this little header piece sticks past the side jamb. And then when you nail these casings into the door jamb, they don't quite line up. That's where I like to dry fit the piece, and I'll use the little shim in there just to get things matching up along the base here. You're probably just gonna need to stick it in just a tiny little bit, dry fit things, get everything kind of lined up. Now I'm gonna glue up the two pieces. I like to glue both sides. I'll take the wood glue, I'll get some on there, and then I'll kind of smear it around with my finger so I'm getting perfect penetration. Also, you wanna keep a little bit of a wet paper towel or a rag. You're gonna get some squeeze out. So now I'll get this thing in place and I will get the shim in. And then I'm gonna throw a nail into the jamb here just to hold this thing in place. Now for this miter, if it's split apart a little bit, you can always throw a shim in the outside corner. That'll just rock everything and make everything tight there. And then you wanna try to shoot one casing into the other casing to hold that miter nice and snug. This is very dangerous here. Be careful, put on some eye protection. You can see right now, the lights got a little bright for me and I missed the shot. It shot out the front. Whatever you do, don't put your hand in the way using your hand as a clamp. If you miss that shot, it'll fire right into your finger. I've seen it happen before. And then I'm just gonna secure up the miter. I'll put a couple shots in there. I'll come down 1 foot on the left leg there and put another one into the jamb. That's just gonna hold the miter tight. Then I'm gonna come to the midway point, push the casing onto the line, shoot it in there, go to the bottom, hit the line, shoot it on, and then I'll come back and put a few more nails into the mid span and just check to see if there's any gaps. Then we're gonna work over on the right hand miter. During the dry fit, I can see that it would be best to shim the outer part of the miter so that it meets up. And you can see that the heel of the cut is a little bit open. So what I'm gonna do is just take my pencil and mark a little bit of the tip of the miter, and then I'm gonna take that outside and trim that off at about 44 3/4 degrees. I'll bring that back in, check the fit, it's looking good. I will glue it up. Then I'll start to nail this thing into place. This time I'm going to be a little more careful on that outside shot and make sure I don't shoot myself. And then just work my way down and make sure that I keep it just off of the hinges. So you've got that installed. You can run your fingers on these miters here and you're gonna feel some ridges, and it's not 1,000%. And if we take a look at some of the old miters in this house, there's some good ones, but there's definitely a lot of bad ones. So if you use that shim trick and you take care to get a nice flush, precise shot on the outside corners, you're gonna do a lot better. But if you want perfection, let's get over to this method here. This is what I consider to be the gold standard for installing these door trims. So this is the CA activator glue up method. It's basically crazy glue with activator that will set the glue off and lock things together within seconds. If you're going to be doing a bunch of these, you want to have a little bit of a tabletop surface where you can work up here rather than being down on the ground. You can do it on the ground. If you only have a couple, that's not a bad idea. And then to prevent the pieces from sticking to the material below, you can use newspaper, cardboard, or the best thing is wax paper. Nothing sticks to the wax paper and it is awesome. Now the biggest mistake that I made when I first tried this method is I did not get comfortable doing the dry fit. You have to get a comfort level. So get your pieces, and you can see here the table's not perfectly flat, so I'm dry fitting them together, and I'm noticing that I'm going to need to push the outer edge down, and then I like to start at the tip and rock the heel of the cut forward, and then that's nice and flush. Then you want to stand your piece up. If you've got any crusties on your glue bottle, just take some pliers and crack that bit off and pull that off. That way you can get the glue out. It's important to have the piece standing out. That way the glue is going to flow out nicely out of the bottle and you can get a healthy amount. You want to make sure that you're using the thick glue. If you have the medium or the thin, it is no good for this. Do not use those. Then you want to take your other piece, flip this piece back down, take the off piece, spray the activator. You want to spray away from the finished edge. Give it 2 or 3 just so that it's completely coated here on the one side. Put your piece down, line up the tips. Get that tip lined up. I've got my pressure down, tips nicely lined up, and then rotate it in towards the other piece. And then you want to put kind of maximum pressure to squish that glue. It takes 2 to 3 seconds for that glue to set up. So rock it in there and just feel if it's flush, make any kind of little quick micro adjustments, and then hold. Just hold that for about 5 to 10 seconds. Once that's set, if you have any squeeze out, take your little scraping bar and just scrape that squeeze out off. It's going to be very hard. And then I will just take a little 150 grit sandpaper and just sand that little miter up. And yeah, that should be glassy smooth. We'll move on to the other side. You want to do the dry fit again just to make sure everything is cool. The long piece up on the edge, and then it's going to be so much easier. Load up the glue, put the CA glue on. Then take the header piece and the piece that's already attached, rock that upwards, spray the activator away from the face of the material, make sure it's nice and coated, flip it back down, line up the noses, get them nice and flush. Check, you have a little bit of time here just to make sure everything is cool before you start shoving the thing in, and then pivot it nice and tight. Maximum pressure, feel for flushness at the heel there, and hold and clamp. Give that 5 to 10 seconds. Come on back, grab your scraper. If anything's squeezed out, just scrape it off. Give it a quick sand up, and you can almost, by the time you've done the sand up, you can pick this thing up off the workbench and take it over to the door. Get it in place. Make sure that everything is kosher and that it's fit, and you don't need to cut any of the drywall out of the way. If you have some drywall sticking out, just shave that back with a utility knife. The fit here is pretty nice. So get that thing fit, center it on your marks, and then just shoot this thing into place. Shoot the header on first, and then you can see here that my side jamb is all kind of twisted. You can definitely just push that thing back to the line. The miters are going to stay glued together. Follow your marks and nail it into the jamb. This is all installed. These babies are absolute glass. There is no ridges or edges whatsoever. That's as good as miters are ever going to be. But if you've done some installation at home and your miters are not looking that great, don't worry, you can fix them up. It's a bit of work, but if you want to see how to do it, check out this video right over here. But if you're looking But if you're looking for perfection, oh, shit. Oh my God, I might need to take a break. Okay, let's try it one more time. But if you're looking for perfection, oh, nope.